What if the most celebrated peace treaty of the modern era was actually a beautifully disguised trap designed to collapse an entire nation from the inside out? While the world blindly cheered for the end of a terrifying global crisis, a completely different, silent war was officially declared without a single bullet ever being fired. Before we peel back the layers of this massive global deception, please take a quick moment to hit the subscribe button, leave a like on this video, and share it. Let us set the scene. It is the middle of June in the year 2026. The location is the incredibly glamorous Palace of Versailles in France. The President of the United States is standing proudly in front of a sea of flashing cameras and desperate reporters. With a confident smile, he leans down and signs his name on a historic piece of paper. In the exact moment that his pen leaves the page, the global financial markets violently explode with joy. The stock market surges to incredible new heights. The terrifyingly high oil prices that had been suffocating citizens suddenly crash back down to a manageable level. Every single major news network on the planet flashes the exact same breaking news at the bottom of the screen. They announce to the world that a final binding peace deal with Iran has been officially completed. The media spins the story in every direction imaginable. Some networks call it the greatest diplomatic triumph of the century. Other networks furiously call it a pathetic betrayal of Western values. Meanwhile, the leadership in Iran goes on their own television networks. They proudly declare that they have won a massive victory for their national sovereignty. The strangest part is that none of these perspectives are completely wrong, but every single one of those politicians, news anchors, and geopolitical experts is looking in the wrong direction. They're all asking the completely wrong questions because while the entire world was absolutely hypnotized by the flashing cameras, something else was happening. In the exact same 24-hour window, while diplomats were shaking hands, a completely different game was being played in the shadows. Thousands of miles away from the bright lights of Versailles, there was one powerful nation that did not send a single diplomat to the talks. They did not fire a single weapon. They did not sign a single international treaty. Yet they walked away as the undisputed champion. That country was not Iran. It was not Russia. It certainly was not the United States. It was China. Today, we are going to look closely at exactly what the leadership in Beijing was doing in the shadows, while America was celebrating. We are going to break down how a few quiet, calculated decisions made in a single day permanently changed the balance of global power. But more importantly, we are going to look at the terrifying reality of the peace deal itself. Because the treaty that was signed in France was never actually meant to bring peace to the Middle East. It was the first step of a highly calculated, deeply deceptive operation. It is a plan deliberately engineered to fall apart. And when it finally shatters, the response from the West will not involve sending military jets, bombs, or aircraft carriers. The real response will involve something much quieter, much cheaper, and infinitely more devastating to the fabric of a nation. To truly understand how a nation can conquer the globe without ever fighting a war, you have to understand a brilliant concept of strategy. In any complex competition, the winner is almost never the person who fights the hardest on the battlefield. The one who bleeds the most is usually the loser. The true winner is the silent spectator. It is the master player who sits back, allows their bitter rivals to violently exhaust each other, and then casually steps in. They claim the ultimate prize, while everyone else is too tired to stop them. Think about a very simple business scenario. Imagine two massive, heavily funded supermarkets located right across the street from each other. The owners absolutely despise each other. They spend all of their money running aggressive, negative advertisements and slash their prices so low that they lose money on every item. They are so blindly obsessed with destroying one another that they drain their own bank accounts just to win the neighborhood. Meanwhile, a few blocks away, a smart entrepreneur quietly opens a brand new, highly modern grocery store. This person hires the absolute best chefs, builds a beautiful facility, and creates a vastly superior shopping experience. Within a single year, all the customers have permanently migrated to the new store while the others go bankrupt. The two fighting supermarkets close their doors, and the new owner never had to say a single bad word about either of them. This is the exact strategic masterpiece that was executed flawlessly in the summer of 2026. Let us look at the very first move made in the shadows on the day the world focused on France. The leadership in Beijing released a comprehensive, massive document that was designed to completely rewrite the future of humanity. They introduced a framework known as the Global Governance Initiative. This was not just a friendly, vague suggestion about world peace. It was a literal architectural blueprint for a brand new world order, laying out specific rules for human society. The document detailed how international trade should be conducted and how power should be distributed across the planet. On that exact same day, this massive initiative was publicly and officially supported by nearly 160 different countries. Think about the sheer, staggering scale of that number. That is nearly double the size of the entire NATO alliance. 160 sovereign nations silently agreed to new global rules, while the Western Empire was shaking hands in Europe. The core message was simple but revolutionary. It explicitly rejected the idea that one Western superpower dictates rules for the planet. It painted a picture of a world where power is shared equally, rather than forced through economic sanctions and military threats. Skeptical critics might point out that diplomatic language is nothing new, but concrete actions change the course of human history. And what happened next was definitely not just talk. China quietly announced the creation of 3 brand new, massive international organizations. The first was an organization dedicated to global artificial intelligence cooperation, headquartered directly in the bustling financial hub of Shanghai. The second was a massive organization built to manage global data infrastructure, headquartered in Beijing. The third was a highly sophisticated international mediation center built specifically to resolve legal disputes between countries, headquartered in Hong Kong. If you see the invisible strings, hit the subscribe button and share this geopolitical dive with someone who refuses to be manipulated. This move was a masterstroke. In the modern 21st century, land and tanks are no longer the ultimate sources of supreme power. The world is now completely run by artificial intelligence, massive digital data infrastructure, and complex legal frameworks. Whoever controls the invisible flow of digital data controls the future of the global economy and writes the rules. Whoever successfully trains the smartest AI writes the rules for the next 100 years. A new flag was planted in these pillars. Look at the absolute brilliance of this timing. The United States was completely exhausted, trying to calm a furious domestic population. They were dealing with skyrocketing inflation, a panicked stock market, and the messy, highly controversial conclusion of an overseas crisis. Their focus was entirely consumed by immediate political survival. At that moment of maximum distraction, a new global foundation was poured. This was not a lucky coincidence. It was the result of incredible, chilling patience and flawless execution by the silent spectator. Taking control of future technology and data was only the very first step. The second move targeted the financial system. The absolute core of American imperial power has always been its money and the dominance of the United States dollar. This is exactly what allows one single country to place heavy, crippling sanctions on another to control food and energy. If you control the specific currency everyone must use, you effectively control the entire world. But a change was coming. While the cameras were snapping photos in France, a very quiet financial conference was taking place in Shanghai. Key officials from the central bank made a series of announcements that completely shook the foundation of global finance. They revealed that foreign central banks and sovereign wealth funds could borrow Chinese currency using foreign government bonds as guarantee. They opened a massive, shiny new door for the rest of the world to borrow heavy financing without touching the dollar. They also announced that several of their largest national banks would handle massive offshore currency trades within special trade zones. This was a carefully calculated acceleration of making their own currency a globally accepted standard and a direct challenge to the system. High-ranking officials also declared they were putting strict legal measures in place to punish foreign entities that pressured their domestic companies. They were literally building a legal fortress to make those Western sanctions completely useless and protect their economic interests. All of this financial maneuvering brings us to the harsh reality of what happened at the trade negotiating table. Because of prolonged naval blockades, the cost of living in the West had become completely unbearable for working-class families. Runaway inflation was rapidly destroying the political stability of the nation, leading to absolute, undeniable desperation among officials. American officials agreed to a massive, humiliating trade deal, instantly removing heavy tariffs on tens of billions of dollars of goods. We are talking about everyday items, consumer electronics, and basic manufacturing products that normal people buy every single day. To get this deal done, the American officials had to publicly admit that traditional manufacturing jobs were never coming back home. Economic experts watched this unfold in disbelief. This was a completely one-sided victory for the rising Eastern power. They gave up absolutely nothing in return, refusing to change domestic subsidy policies or address massive trade imbalances. They simply sat patiently at the table, watched their opponent sweat under domestic inflation, and happily collected the reward. The strongest military power on earth was reduced to begging for cheaper consumer goods just to keep their citizens from rioting. That is the exact definition of a shifting empire. Then came the third move regarding the future of innovation. A highly respected global scientific journal released its latest index tracking which countries are actually inventing the future. It measures raw scientific output across universities and laboratories. The final numbers were absolutely staggering for the West. The hard data proved that the rising Eastern power had undeniably overtaken the West in the vital field of chemistry. They commanded over half of the entire global output. Let that reality sink in for a second. More than 50%. They were aggressively dominating applied sciences, physical sciences, and the incredibly lucrative fields of biology and pharmaceuticals. Brilliant companies used AI to discover medical drugs in months, a process that used to take traditional scientists many years. But while this scientific explosion happened in the East, the West was violently moving backward on that same day. The central banking authorities in the United States announced that they were keeping interest rates punishingly high for a long time. When interest rates are high, businesses cannot afford to borrow money to build new, expensive laboratories for research. Tech companies are forced to shrink their budgets and lay off brilliant workers while research departments lose their crucial funding. The overall ability of the nation to invent and compete is slowly, painfully suffocated by these financial constraints. We are about to expose the psychological weapon being used to collapse nations, so please subscribe and share this video. One nation spent massive energy and billions to secure a fragile, temporary peace deal. Meanwhile, the silent spectator rewrote the rules. They began dismantling the dominance of the dollar and extracted billions in trade concessions from a desperate, inflated rival. They officially took the crown as the scientific capital of the race without losing a soldier or spending $1 on missiles. They simply watched their rivals drain themselves, and then they quietly, confidently took over the board. Now for the peace deal. Everything discussed so far is the global story. But there's a different, sinister story unfolding inside the borders of Iran. We have to ask an uncomfortable question. Did the designers of this historic peace treaty actually want lasting peace? The answer is obvious. They did not want peace. They wanted a perfectly constructed trap regarding nuclear materials. The agreement required Iran to dilute materials inside their country under the unrelenting supervision of global atomic inspectors. On the surface, this sounds like a perfectly reasonable request, but there's a massive flaw built into the foundation. The Iranian government stated repeatedly that they do not trust those inspectors, viewing the agency as deeply biased and compromised. Every analyst and intelligence agency knew this. The politicians signing the paper knew this fact as they smiled for cameras. If one side of a diplomatic treaty rejects the referee, then the game can never be played fairly or honestly. The nation was never going to pack up their materials, only agreeing to handle things on their own soil under their conditions. This created a massive blind spot, making it literally impossible to prove that the terms of the treaty were being followed. Western leaders knew it was impossible to verify and fully expected the other side to cheat on the agreement. Officials made it clear that if terms were violated, severe consequences would follow within a very specific 60-day deadline. Attached to that short deadline was a thinly veiled threat of intense military and economic retaliation against the nation. You sign a binding agreement knowing the verification is broken, and the other side does not trust the referee. That is not a genuine attempt at bringing harmony. That is a carefully constructed trap wrapped in beautiful packaging. The purpose of the treaty was short-sighted: reopen shipping lanes, stop rising gas prices, and survive the immediate political cycle. It was a temporary band-aid placed over a massive bullet hole. The architects knew what would happen when 60 days expired. When the verification fails, the West will have a legal excuse to declare the treaty completely broken and point fingers. This gives them the ultimate justification to launch a brand new wave of aggressive pressure that looks very different from war. The era of ground troops is over. The new method of modern warfare is entirely invisible and highly sophisticated. Look at Bangladesh in 2024. What happened there is the exact playbook currently being prepared for the Middle East. A leader was forced to flee during what looked like an organic uprising of youth demanding pure democracy. But raw anger alone does not overthrow a stable government in days. You have to look at the hidden architecture. Huge sums of money were quietly funneled into the country through private organizations, disguised as promoting human rights and education. Western research groups published strategy guides on how to control information flow and partner with massive tech platforms. They turned the internet into a manipulated battlefield, using culture to weaponize anger through artists and popular musicians. Catchy lyrics encouraged youth to rise up and break chains. This is the absolute genius of modern psychological warfare. You just need a viral song and an algorithm to push it to millions of glowing smartphones to create an army. They targeted minority groups and students who had nothing to lose, whose stories spread like wildfire across social media. The end result was structured chaos. The government collapsed, police vanished, and the leader was replaced by a Western-connected figure. The peace treaty in France contains a clause stating foreign powers will not interfere, but that is not how it works. When millions are sent to independent charities, it is not considered official interference. These chains bypass strict definitions of hostile acts. The ultimate target is the military and religious establishment. If you poison their legitimacy from the inside, the structure eventually collapses. You just need a reconstruction fund, digital activists, viral videos, and a temporary 60-day peace treaty as a smokescreen. The nation that truly won the 24 hours did not have to fire a single shot or lose a single life. The only question that matters is who will actually be holding the invisible puppet strings when the rebuilding is finally complete.